Hey guys, welcome back to a new episode of DevDrawer. Today we're going to be kind of finishing up the app that we've been working on that's used Swagger for the API documentation, and basically it's a web app. And with the previous things that we've done, we've essentially built out an entire website. We've used Swagger to create the API documentation. We built out a custom API using PHP, and then for the actual app itself we use SammyJS, and you can look through some of the previous tutorials that we've done in order to see how we've got to this point. But essentially we're going to be taking what we did then and we're going to be using Cordova in order to build it out as an actual app. I don't know if you have an emulator on your desktop, but I have found that the best emulator to use would be GenyMotion. So GenyMotion, and you can go to GenyMotion.com and look at their solutions and then download the desktop. Basically what this does is it runs on top of VirtualBox, which I've went into tutorials in the past on how to install virtual desktop and how to actually make it work. So this will run on top of that. It'll create a virtual Android device, and it's a very fluid, it's basically like having an Android device on your desktop. So whether you're using Mac, Windows, Linux, whatever you're using, you can use GenyMotion to create this virtual Android device. Whenever you get to the point where you need to test it out on an iPhone or an iPad or something like that, there is ways to do that, but most of those require you to have the actual device as well as a Mac. However, for this tutorial, we're just going to be going over the Android part of it. So in order to kind of get started with that, make sure you go to GenyMotion, download the desktop version. It is free. Go ahead and create an account, because the next part we're going to go into is actually setting up GenyMotion, installing the Android emulators that we want to use, and then you'll just be able to sign in and be able to use those devices. So for right now, just go to GenyMotion.com, download that before we get into the next part of it. Once you've downloaded GenyMotion, you will come up to a screen that looks like this. Essentially, you're going to use the email address and the password that you created on the GenyMotion website. So I'm going to go ahead and fill out mine. If you haven't done yours, you can just create an account. We're going to use it for personal use. If you want to buy a license, I highly recommend getting one, because it is something that it allows you to create multiple devices, and this is a very cool tool if you want to get into mobile development. So we're just going to go ahead and continue through, accept the license terms after you read them, and then we are going to go ahead and get out of this for now. Once you get to this screen, we're going to start setting up these devices. So whenever we are creating this device, we need to keep in mind that we are using an external API. With the newest version of Android, the external API, having it hit that external link could create some issues. It won't create issues on the device itself. It's just because we're using it in a test environment. It'll create issues. At least that I've found in the past is that's what it does. So we're going to use the I want to say 8.0 version of Android. So let's just click on this one for now, and let's just run any one of these devices should work. We're just going to run the Google Pixel, and we can just keep whatever we have, default everything. So we're just going to put let's see, dev drawer test, and then everything else can just stay the same. You don't need to really modify anything here. So let's go ahead and hit install, and then it's going to run through the installation process. And while we're waiting on it to do that, it's going to essentially create a virtual device on your VirtualBox installation. So you most likely are going to need VirtualBox to be installed on your computer that you're using. If you don't have it already, go ahead and download it so that you can use it, because it does create a VirtualBox instance. So just keep that in mind. If you get to this point and it doesn't work, there's a pretty good chance that you don't have VirtualBox installed on your computer. Okay, once it gets done installing the device, this is the next screen that you'll see. Basically, it's just it just lists out the devices that we currently have installed, so we can double click on the one that we just created, and then it's going to spin up a virtual device for us, which you can't see that screen right now, but it's just basically it's a little pop-up that says starting virtual device, and then once it starts, it'll actually start showing the Android device that I'm going to click over to in just a second. Alright, so now what y'all should be seeing is something very close to what's currently on my screen. This is the emulator that's inside of your this is your GenyMotion emulated Android device, and it acts just like an Android device. So you can click buttons, you can pull the screen up. It's basically like a touch screen. You can go over to settings, do whatever you want to do. You can close out certain tabs. So all of this it's just like if you were on an Android device. So basically it creates this Android device look for you. What we're going to end up doing here is we're going to use Cordova to take what we have inside of our code, and we're going to build it out as an app, and then it's going to create a debug APK for us, and then we're going to take that APK and we're going to drag it over into this window. But for right now, we need to switch over to our Visual Studio, and then we need to actually install Cordova, set it up, and then push it out. Okay, so before we install Cordova, let me talk about it a little bit. So what is Cordova? If you've ever heard of PhoneGap or anything like that, basically Cordova is it's kind of the same thing as PhoneGap. It's the actual Apache licensed software. Basically PhoneGap is for Adobe and Cordova is for Apache. They're essentially the exact same thing, and there's a bunch of different ways that you can actually go in there and create this app. You could use Android Studio to build it. Whenever you get to the point where you're going to be adding it as an iOS app, you need to go into Xcode on a Mac device in order to create that iOS version of it. But Cordova in this instance is going to allow us to create something that takes the HTML code that we've already built in order to build out this SammyJS app, and it's going to convert it into usable Android code that can be packaged into an APK, which can be installed onto the device itself. So I'm going to switch back over to my browser real quick, and I've already opened up Cordova. So let me minimize this so you can see it. Where's it at? Here. So this is the Cordova website. It's cordova.apache.org, and I just clicked on the Getting Started, and this gives you all of the information that you need in order to get it installed on your device and then start running it. So let's switch back over to our Visual Studio Code and switch back there. Okay, so what I would recommend you do is to create a new folder, and then inside of that folder install Cordova, because it's going to we're going to copy the HTML that's inside of our live folder that's here. We're going to copy this, and then we're going to paste it into the app folder that we create, and then we're going to run Cordova on that. I don't want to get the two mixed up right now because Cordova does install some files, and it takes the basically the www folder, and then that's what it converts into an app. But since this is like its own on our web server, it's its own project, we're going to create another Cordova project that kind of ties into it, and then at the end of it we're going to take all of this code except for the API, and we're going to copy it over into that folder. So just bear with me just a moment while I create another folder for us to start using. Okay, so I've created a folder on my desktop because this is where this app lies, is on a folder in the desktop. So I created a folder called app, and we're going to add it to our project now. So if you go to File, Add Folder to Workspace, we're just going to select our blank app folder that you created, and we're going to add that in. So now we have our live, which is actually the application, and then our app, which is going to be where the Cordova installation resides and where everything else goes. So whenever you go to install Cordova, you can use the command line that you can see inside of the cordova.apache.org website. From there, you need to make sure that you have Node.js and npm. So from here, I'm going to open up a terminal for the app, and then here, this is where you would check to see if you have npm or node. So I'm going to run node -v, and that's going to tell me that I have node installed. Same thing for npm, and we're going to do -v on that so we can see that we have these two versions installed. If you don't have node or npm installed, go ahead and if you look at the documentation for installing Cordova, there's a link there. You essentially just need to install it on your machine and make sure that you have the capabilities to be able to run it. Now the next part is we're going to run a command called npm install -g Cordova. And we're going to run through that, and it's going to install Cordova for us. Now, we're going to be doing this entire process inside of Visual Studio, so you may have issues if you don't have the correct permissions to run Cordova inside of Visual Studio. So while I was setting up this project, I usually do this from the command line, or I do it from PowerShell. However, I'm going to show you how to do it in Visual Studio. So while I was initially trying to set it up so I can show it to you guys, I ran into an issue where my Visual Studio editor did not have the ability to make modifications on the on my desktop. So if you run into an issue where you go to do the next one where it's like, let's say if you wanted to type in Cordova -v, and if you hit enter on that and it gives you some issues, if it gives you some problems and it tells you that you can't run a certain script from the Cordova folder that was installed, so basically it's going to be this, and it's going to say that it can't run this this file, you're going to need to type in the following command, or you need to switch over to PowerShell or command line in the administrative mode in order to run that. So if you want to do it through Visual Studio, this is what you would type in. So we're going to do set execution policy, and then we're going to do scope current user -x execution. Let's see, I'm trying to read and spell at the same time. Policy unrestricted. So if you run this, it's not going to say anything. It's just going to go to the next part. And then if you go to type in Cordova -v again, it should give you the ability to see what your current Cordova version is. So I'm going to go ahead and hit run on this and see nothing happens. But now if I type in Cordova -v, it's going to actually give me the Cordova version. So if you go to type in Cordova -v and it doesn't give you this, it gives you an error that's basically talking about the execution policy with a link to Microsoft. You need to type this in, or you need to go to PowerShell or command and run it as the administrator in order for you to be able to run the code that Cordova needs you to run. Now that we've verified Cordova is installed and you've gotten to this point successfully, we're actually going to build the Cordova app inside of our app. So right now you can see there's nothing inside of it, and we're going to run the following command. So we're going to do Cordova, Cordova create, and let's just call this one whatever you want to call it. I'm going to call it dev drawer, and then we're going to also have so we're going to call it dev drawer inside of the folder that we're currently in. So whenever it goes to create the app, it's going to create an app folder called dev drawer. But we also want to name it something, and whenever you go to build an app, you need to have a .com name on it. So we're going to do com, or not .com, but com dot, and then let's just do dev drawer test, and you can call this whatever you want to call it. This is just what we're going to call it for this, and then we're going to create a I guess a short name for it. So let's just do dev drawer test. Now when we run this, you can see over here it updated. It created a folder called dev drawer, and it has this www folder. So if we run this code and create the APK for it, we can install it inside of our the Android emulator that we've created with GenyMotion. So if you want to, we can go ahead and run that, or you can take all of the HTML that we've put inside of here and copy and paste it over here so it actually runs your app. But for what we're going to do right now is we're going to run the initial setup of what the app looks like. So we're going to do Cordova build Android. Actually, I think we're going to have to run and install before we get there, but let me just check. Create platform app. Okay, so before we do Cordova build, let's go back one, and we're going to do Cordova platform add Android. And you can add iOS here as well, so it would be Cordova platform add iOS. So we're going to add the Android platform. Oh wait, sorry, before we get there, we got to cd into the folder that it created. So cd dev drawer, and then we're going to run that command again. And you can see here it's adding more stuff to it. So we have our platforms folder now, which it's going to start building out this platform for Android. If you did iOS, it would build out a folder here for iOS. Now that we have our folder structure for Android, we can successfully run Cordova build Android. And the first time you run this, it may be a little slow just because it has to install Gradle and a few other things in the background. If you have any issues with it failing or something like that, maybe Gradle didn't get installed, you can usually try to just run it again and it'll work. But if it does work, you have this link here where it's telling me that this is where the APK is currently can be found. So I'm going to copy all the way to the debug, and then I'm going to open that up in my file system, and then I'm going to take the debug.apk that has been installed, and I'm going to drag it over into this emulator that we have right now. So I'm going to open up that folder, and then I'm just going to drag this APK into it, and it's going to say that it's installing. And this is the default Cordova application. It's just telling you that this device is ready and you can proceed with everything that you need to proceed with. So that's essentially what we're looking for this thing to work. So let's go ahead and close out of it. And you can see it has dev drawer test, has the name. It actually installed it into the applications. So if we come over here, we have the dev drawer test application that we just installed to the device. So that's exactly what we want it to be. So now we're going to take the project that we've been working on and we're going to copy it over into our file system, which is the www folder. Before you delete everything inside of here and you copy it over, there is this file here called index.js. This needs to remain there. So whenever you're looking at what you're going to be adding from your live folder, you can add everything that you have over here. Just do not remove the index.js because we're going to have to reference it in just a moment. So before we start migrating everything over, I just remembered something. Whenever we built our API, we built it specifically to use on a web server. So if we go to use the way that the API is currently handling the authorization, it's not going to work. And I'll show you what I mean. So let me switch over to my browser real quick. So I'm going to switch over to the browser, and this is the live API.local server that we've been running. So if we hit refresh on this, all the pages work. However, if I go back to my Visual Studio, so let me minimize this, and if I go back over here and I click on Go Live, so if you have the virtual extension installed on your if you have the virtual server extension installed on your Visual Studio Code, you'll see this. That's covered in one of my previous videos. But if we go live here, the way that we're gathering our tokenization, let me switch back over to Chrome. The way that we're gathering our tokenization doesn't allow it to work because we're using the PHP, let me see, what was it called? PHP version controllers, pages. We are using the Apache request headers code to grab that PHP the header authorization that we're sending over for our bearer token. Whenever you're using a application like this, or we're actually using the Android application, it's not going to be sending over that Apache request header. So we need to go in there and modify our code a little bit to not use the Apache request header, but to actually use something like, within the post. So let me switch back over to Visual Studio Code here, and let me show you what I'm talking about. So this is the Apache request headers function that we're using that's grabbing this authorization bearer token for us. Right now, if you remember on the browser, it's currently blank because the Apache information is not being sent over because it's not coming from an Apache server. Whenever we built it initially, we were using a WAMP Apache-based server to bring it over. But if we run the code in here, the code works, however, it's not sending it over as an Apache request header. So we need to go in there and we're going to change this around a little bit to make it where it actually goes, we basically send over a post object that contains that authorization in it. So let me show you real quick how we can do that. So let's get rid of the app. Well, not get rid of it, but let's minimize that for a second, and we're going to go over to our live JS folder, and we're going to open up our initialize, and we're going to open up our app.js. So what we're currently doing is we're sending it over as a header, and then this is the variable that's being stored on the local storage of the browser. So we want to continue to grab that local storage token, but we don't want to send it over as a header. We're actually going to send it over the same way you would do if you were sending over a variable to be updated or deleted or something like that. So we're just going to send over a data object here, and let me show you how to do that real quick. So we're in the right one. Let's go to our app.js, and we're just going to comment out this line for now. And then below our JSON, we're going to do data, and then we're going to send over a variable called authorization. So authorization, and then we're just going to send over this local storage item that we're already grabbing. And that should do that. Okay, so now what it's doing is it's sending it over as a post object for our PHP script in the API side of it to handle. So let me make sure. Okay, now let's go to our read.php, and if we look through the code here, it's currently gathering the read information. It's basically just running that function for the read. So if we switch over to our pages and we see read here, that's where we have that headers Apache request headers. So what we want to do on our read.php is that we want it to send over a post variable. So right now in our initialized our app.js, we're sending over this authorization post variable. So I'm going to copy authorization, and then I'm going to go to our read, and we're going to send it over as a post. And then inside of our pages.php, inside of this read, we're just going to create a variable called auth. And if the whenever it goes to send it over, it's going to send over that post variable. So we can get rid of this headers, and then we can just check to see if auth is set. So if auth is set, then we're going to essentially just replace the authorization with auth. And this will allow us to grab that that token that we can actually see. So let me switch back over to my browser, and so you can see it's working now. So as you can see here, it's grabbing those pages where it wasn't previously grabbing it, because now it's no longer relying on that Apache functionality, because it's not coming from an Apache server, which is the same thing where we go to build it up in our Android or iOS app. It's not coming from an Apache server like it was with the web server. It's actually coming from an app. So now we need to also go in there and put the content here, because right now it's still it's displaying the navigation, but it's not displaying the content like it is over here. So we need to go in there and update the other function that controls this, and essentially just do the same thing that we just did. So let me open back up Visual Studio, and now we're going to open up our single.php, and we're already sending over a slug, so we're also going to send over post authorization. Where'd it go? There, okay. We're going to send over post authorization as well. Inside of our app.js, we're just going to grab what we have here, and we're going to paste the same thing in our get page. So we're sending over to slug. Don't need to paste all of it then. So let's just grab authorization all the way to the token, and then we're going to paste that as authorization. So now it's going to be sending over that slug and the authorization variable. So let's go back to our single. We're sending it over now, and we go back to our pages, and let's find the single page. So create single. So let's just also again pass that auth variable. We can comment out this part and then just replace this header's authorization with auth. And then the same thing here. There. Oh, what did I do wrong? Oh, there we go. Alright, so now, let me see. It's returning the information inside of our single. And let me make sure. Initialize.js. Okay, so now let me switch back over to our browser. Okay, now we're back in our browser. It's still not showing, so let me switch back to the code real quick. And let's find out where. Okay, so we added the data here, but we forgot to remove the headers, so we just comment that part out, and now it's working. So let me switch back over to Chrome, and we can see now that it's got the home page, information about us, contact us, services. So this is the way that we're going to be pushing the authorization variable to our API. Instead of using the Apache headers, we're just going to push it over there through a post response using the AJAX call. So let's see now. Let's go ahead and switch over to our Swagger, and over here this is no longer going to work because all of this is relying on the authorization up here. So let's go into our code, and we're going to modify that now to make it where it actually works with the changes that we just did. So let's switch back over to our code, and let's go to our pages.php, and inside of our, let's do the single for now, we're going to add another variable here. We're going to call it authorization. So authorization, and then we're just going to add another property. So let's do this, and then comma with the property, and just call it authorization as well. So now we should have a second variable inside of our single.php that is required. So let me switch back over to the browser here. So if we look at single now, we have slug and authorization. So if we go to try it out with just the slug, it's going to return an error. Okay, well, we made it required, so let's just type in something. And it's going to return an error saying that the token did not match. So let's go to the auth. We're going to try it out so we can grab that token. And I'm just going to copy the token from here. And we're just going to paste it into here and hit execute. And now you can see that it's working. So the API now is going to require this authorization string whenever you go to view anything on it. So we also need to come in here and update the the read page in order to have this authorization set for it as well. So let me switch back over to the browser, and we are going to send over a request body inside of this. Essentially, we could just copy this over, and we're going to paste it right here. And let me see. Take away word wrap for a second so I can make sure it's all in the correct lineup. So we have a little space right here. Alright. We don't need slug on this one because it's going to be getting it for all pages. Let's go back down to toggle the word wrap so you can see it. And we can just get rid of this OA property here. So if we save that and we go back to our browser, Now we can refresh and see that now there's a tokenization string required. So if we try it without one, or with just a dummy one, it's going to return that nothing's going to happen. So now if we come back over here to authorize it, grab this token and send it with it. Type error failed to execute fetch on window. Oh, that's because in the code this is currently a get. So if we look over here, it's a get. We need to send it over as a post. So let's switch back over to the code, and we're going to change this from get to post and save that, and we're going to switch back over to Chrome, refresh. We got to grab our authorization code again, so let's grab it here, and then we're going to do the read, try it out, and we're going to send over that code now, and we can see that it's got all the information that we need. I think that is the only parts of the app that require authorization for the front end. So I think that we can finish up. I think that'll be the last thing we need to do with our Swagger side of it. So let's switch over now to our live server. Just make sure everything's working again. And now we're going to actually run the code to build this. So let me switch back to Visual Studio so you can see that. And let's go ahead and take this and let's just run a clear so it clears out the screen for us. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the CSS.js pages and index.html, and I'm going to replace everything in our www folder with what I copy over from our live folder, except for the index.js that's here. So bear with me just a second while I pull that up. And so we need all of this, and then on the app side we can just get rid of this, and this. Alright, so now if you look in the www folder, there's nothing there except for the JS folder, so I'm going to paste all of the information that we have, and I'm just going to verify that it is the correct one. So it's got the minus the headers. Okay, so now this should work so that we can push it over to our device here, or our device over here. Before we continue, I actually ran a little test. I paused the video and ran a test to see how it worked, and I ran into an issue that we can't fix with the way that this is currently set up. And the issue is something I didn't even think of, but it's due to everything being set up on WAMP. So that was a oversight on my part, but I didn't really expect it to not be able to use the IP address for the local, but WAMP installs on 127.0.0.1. The Android emulator also uses 127.0.0.1 as the IP address. So with having this, I tried to go in there and modify the host files for the Android device, and after 45 minutes or so trying to troubleshoot this one issue, I realized that it may just not be possible with the way at least my local router is set up. My local router is very secured, and it makes it difficult to be able to transverse from one network to another network. So I think I might have came up with an easier solution that you guys can test out if you run into the same issue. If you don't run into the same issue, you can essentially just build it out as it is right now. And I'll show you how to do that at the end of what I'm fixing to go over. But if you do have an issue where, if for some reason or another it's not letting you connect to your API, and it's basically when the app goes to run, it's blank. There's no pages, nothing. It doesn't matter what you do, it won't let you connect to it. So if you run into that issue, you can go ahead and just start following along. Otherwise, just skip to the end of the video where I actually show you out how to use Cordova to build the APK, and then you can try it out from there. But for right now, I just want to kind of go over the fix that I did. So the fix that I did was because the API was being hosted on a WAMP server, I went ahead and took it and published it out to the devdrawer.com, which is my website. it's underneath the files. And essentially I created the database and published out only the API files, just basically modifying the information so it matched up with the URL structure as well as the database that I created for it. So you can do that on your own if you want to, which is the end result of this project would be that it gets pushed out to its own API server that then your app would hit. So I don't think it's that much of an issue because eventually you would have to get there anyway. But for right now, just to kind of finish this video, I went ahead and published it out, and I'm going to show you what you can type into yours in order to make it hit my API until you push it out on yours, or you just have it work directly in WAMP. So I'm going to go ahead and get started in making some of the changes on the information here. So let me just close out all of the files that we're not currently using. So I'm going to close out pretty much everything so I can make sure that I'm viewing everything as it should be. Okay, so let's go into the index.html. In order to make this work with your Cordova app, the index.js file that was saved, it has to be added over here. So if you, right above where you have your current scripts being called, you need to initialize the Cordova in the index.js files. So we're going to do script type equals text JavaScript, and this needs to be a slash, and then source equals Cordova for 1. So Cordova.js. Then I'm just going to copy this and paste it, and then we're going to change this to js/index.js. So this Cordova file should not exist on your web application. It's actually something that Cordova uses to build into the, it's pretty much part of the framework, so it'll get called whenever Cordova goes to do its wraparound for it. So you just need to have it in there in order for it to initialize. Now let me close this so we have more space. Now getting into the changes that I did in order to make this work, and you can use these changes on your app because it will be a publicly available API with some of the functionality taken out. Obviously, I don't want people being able to go in there and delete and update and create new pages, so I removed that functionality so you can only view all of the pages for the navigation, or you can go in there and see the individual page content. So that's one of the differences between my API and the API that we've been going over, is just I didn't want to have that kind of access to my database. So I went ahead and removed that functionality, so it's basically just read-only right now. Whenever you are pushing this out to your server, or if you're connecting to my server, you need to change this so that it's no longer pointing to this local URL that we created in WAMP. And whenever you go to push out your API, this is where you would change it to. But for the time being, we're going to do http://thedevdrawer.com. So that way it'll recognize that the API is being housed on this server rather than being housed on the local server that we were using. And that's all we need to do for the index.html. So now we're going to go in here and edit our app.js and our initialize.js. So on the app.js, we have this authorization. What we're going to do is we're going to change this URL to point to the API that I've created on the dev drawer. So let's go ahead and change this to the devdrawer.com/files/API, because that's the folder that I put it in. You can put yours wherever you want, but this is just where I put it to keep it concise with all the other files that I've had. And we also need to change this URL to point to the same place as well. And then in our initialize.js, we need to change it here. Okay, so one other thing that we need to take into consideration is that whenever the app first loads, it's going to run authenticate and then list pages. So once it hits authenticate, it's going to set a local storage item called data.token. For it to work on Cordova or any mobile application, we have to add the word window.localstorage.setItem. And we have to do that for anywhere we're using the local storage. So down here, we need to put window as well. And I believe that that is all of them on this page. Let me just go through that real quick to make sure. So that's good. All right, so on the initialize.js, we need to do the same thing. So we do window, because local storage by itself will not work whenever you're using Cordova or pushing it out to an Android device, because it's stored differently on the device. So we're going to put window.local storage. Now what we need to also consider is that this information, it won't be set until they load the app for the first time. So typically we would have the page information, the links and all this kind of stuff hard-coded into it, and then if you wanted them to log into something, that's whenever they would get this token set. However, for this tutorial, I put it on like the front end, so it's loaded on the front end in order for it to show the information. So one thing that we need to consider is that since this is not being set up initially, that it's going to load a blank page while it's setting this token, and then it's gathering this. And it won't display the URL or the page content until either the page refreshes or they go to a different page, or you close out of the app and go back into it, because this authentication token doesn't exist whenever the app first opens. And whenever you're on Android, whenever you can't refresh the page because it's not technically a page. Whenever you're in the browser, you can, so that's the reason why it's never been an issue prior to this. But I know whenever you go to load it on your Android device, you would have to close out of the app completely, then reopen it in order to get this token to be set. So what we're going to do instead, or what we're going to do on top of this, is we're going to make it where as soon as it gets a success the first time, we're going to do window.location.reload, and then we're going to set it to true so it does it quickly. But we also don't want to keep this the way it is right now, because if we keep it the way it is right now, it'll basically do an endless loop of reloading. So what we need to do up here is, before the authentication gets called, we need to check to see if this window.local storage token exists. So we're going to do window.local storage get item token, and then we're going to check and see if it's equal to a null or not null. So if it's not equal to a null, or if it is equal to a null, we run the authentication. If not, then it just continues through to list out the pages. So we're just going to put this function inside of it, so it'll only hit it one time. It'll reload the page for the user automatically, so that they don't have to reload it themselves. Let's see, so we got our headers taken out. Alright, well I think that's all that we need to do in order to get this to work the way that it's supposed to. So now that we've gotten this far, if you skipped over the previous section, which I'll notate somewhere in the description of where you needed to skip out to, but if you skipped over the previous section, this is where you need to go in order to start building your Cordova app. So now we're going to open up our terminal window again, make sure we're in the app folder, and then we're going to make sure that we're in that dev drawer folder as well. So cd dev drawer, and then inside of this we're going to run Cordova build Android, and that's going to go through that little process again. It should be a little bit quicker this time since we've already got everything, the prerequisites installed. And then again, I'm going to copy over this debug location, and I'm going to paste it in my Windows, and then on the application side, I'm going to drag this API, this APK into the application. So let me move this over, and now I'm going to take this and I'm going to drag it over. And if you have it previously installed, it'll just overwrite what's already there. But as you can see now, it's producing the content that is coming from our API, or from the dev drawer API if you've caught up with where we're at right now. If we hit menu, it brings us to another page. So this is the mobile version of the website that we created. It's very simplistic, but this kind of gives you an idea of how you can take what we've built using SammyJS and use Cordova to put it into a APK file that you can then install on an Android device. Now, what's cool about this APK file that you were able to use in order to get this app to be visible is that you could essentially just transfer it to your phone. And whenever you get it on your phone, It'd still be in debug mode, so you can't push it out to the marketplace that way, but it'll still be in debug mode so you can actually play around with this app on your phone for real, rather than using an emulator like this. Now that we have the app installed on the phone, I want to show you how to customize it a little bit. So if we I'm going to go ahead and take this, and I'm just going to drag it to the home screen so we can see it. So I'm going to show you how to customize the text that goes here, as well as the icon for it. So inside of our dev drawer folder, we have this config.xml, and this is where you can configure some of that information. So we can change this to let's say live API app. And then over here we can change the description and say this is a sample API app. And we can change all of this information that we want. I'm just going to try to quickly go through it. Real quick. Apparently I can't talk and develop at the same time. And then we're going to put in the team name, so the dev drawer. And then it's going to load the index.html. If you had another page you wanted to load, like login.html or something like that, you can go in there and make it where it logs in. So if we go and we run that Cordova build Android again, we can take that APK that it's going to generate and then bring it back inside of our application. So that's ran. So let me copy it. And then we're going to push it here, and we're going to install it again, or reinstall it, and now the name should be updated to Live API App. So now let's get into how to customize this icon. I won't do all of the icons just because there's multiple formats that you need to worry about between Android, between iOS. And you can also put in a loading screen, like the little gray that was here for a second. You can actually change that to make it where it shows a like a splash screen whenever it's getting ready to load the app. But let's go ahead and go into the part where we need to add an icon. Inside of your config.xml, this is where you're going to add the information. I went ahead and created some different sized logos, and I added them to a folder. Let me see, that you can see over here. So I put it in a res folder, and then icon Android. You can also do splash screen, stuff like that. You can add it here, or you can add it wherever you want to. But as long as you reference it in here where it's actually at, then that'll be where it appears. So I'm going to go ahead, and you can go to Cordova's website to get this, but basically you just need to declare the different sizes and then where those sizes are located at. So I have inside of my icon Android folder, so icon Android, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 images, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 images inside of the code. And that's essentially all you need to do for your Android. iOS is the same thing, except you have to go in there, and there's different ways that you can phrase it. There's different icon sizing requirements, but you can look at Cordova's documentation to figure out which ones would work for you the best. So I'm gonna go ahead and rebuild it one last time, and then that should change the icon for us on the app. Alright, so now I got this URL, or this link. I'm going to copy it, and then I'm going to paste it, and then I'm going to drag over that APK again, and it should update that icon. So let's grab this and drag it over. And now let's close this out, and you can see now you have a custom icon with custom text, and if you pull up down here, you can also see that it is Live API App, and then with our custom icon. And that's about it. There's a lot of other things that you can do to it. Like I said, you can add a splash screen to it. You can customize the way this looks inside of your HTML before you push it out to your app. You can also add in GPS. There's a lot of really cool stuff that you can do using Cordova. I would suggest kind of going through their documentation. Sometimes it's a little bit long-winded, and it depends on which version you have, but most of the stuff that you can do with the phones using a web app like this, it's listed out in Cordova's documentation. I think I've been recording for a while, so this is probably going to be another long video, but I think this is also going to be the last in our API series, at least for the web app version of it. I have gotten a request to do maybe a Laravel API, so I'm going to have to look into maybe doing that. I have some ideas of what I want to do in the near future. And just in case you missed it, I know I've gotten a lot of new subscribers due to a video that I put on Free Code Camp. If you haven't seen that video that I put out on Free Code Camp, it's about 5 hours long, and it tells you how to build a website from setting up the server all the way to pushing it to a production live server and setting up security, SEO. It's a really very in-depth tutorial, and I got a lot of really good response off of it, and also, like I said, I got a lot of really new subscribers. So anybody that's watching this for the first time, I do appreciate you coming over and supporting my channel after seeing what I've done over there. And I loved responding to the comments. I like talking to people. Hopefully it helps out everything that I've done. If you have anything that you want me to do, leave a comment below and let me know what you think I should do next. I have a few ideas, but I'm always open for more. But I think that's going to do it for this one. I appreciate you watching, and I'll talk to you later.